Welcome back to Learning How to Learn. In this video, we'll explore some exciting new research on generative AI, as well as how our brains form connections when we learn, and how we can use the power of metaphors to help us understand and remember new information. Remember how we've talked about chunks, those compact packages of information that your mind can easily access? We've symbolized those chunks as ribbons. Let's dive a little deeper so we can see how this relates to what's actually going on in our brain. Our neurons, tiny biological cells, are like fundamental building blocks of learning in the brain. We make connections between neurons as we're learning. The clumps of connected neurons as we learn something form what we call chunks. The connections we make between neurons strengthen with practice, forming neural pathways that help us recall information more easily. Think of it like links in a necklace. Each time you practice or retrieve the information from your own brain, the links in the neural necklace become stronger. Metaphors, as it turns out, are not just a literary device. They play a crucial role in how we understand and process new information by linking it to information we already know. By linking these abstract concepts to the more concrete, familiar ideas already in our minds, metaphors can help our brains form connections and make sense of complex topics. This is where generative AI, like ChatGPT, comes in. The flow of information through the transformers that are at the heart of these AI platforms are surprisingly like the flow of information through the human brain. These powerful language models can help us create vivid, memorable metaphors to explain challenging concepts. For example, when asked to explain the difference between the main guard and scope in Python programming, ChatGPT generated this metaphor. Think of the main guard in a Python script as the gatekeeper of a castle, and scope as the various rooms within that castle. By relating these abstract programming concepts to a familiar image of a castle, the metaphor helps us understand and remember the difference between main guard and scope more effectively. What can be surprising is that generative AI can devise many different metaphors that can be surprisingly different from one another, even while each metaphor is useful in its own way. You can almost think of metaphors as tents. Where the tent poles pull the tent up is where the metaphor is most powerfully similar to the underlying concept it's related to. Different metaphors hold the tent up at different places. So, for example, if you're trying to understand the structure of atoms with their nucleus and electrons, you could use the metaphor that atoms are similar to a school. The nucleus is like the principal's office, central to the school's functioning and decision-making. The electrons are like students occupying different classrooms, that is, energy levels, and moving between them. That gives 2 points of commonality, 2 tent poles in our tent metaphor. You can see, though, that this metaphor is also a poor fit in many places. Or we could say that atoms are like peaches or mangoes. The nucleus is like a pit at the center of the fruit, containing most of the atom's mass. Second, electrons are like the pulp of the fruit, surrounding the nucleus. Third, the electron shells are like the layers of the fruit, that is, skin, flesh, and core, representing different energy levels. That's 3 points of commonality for this metaphor, but obviously there's a lot of information this metaphor misses. Another metaphor for atoms is the planetary system. This also has 3 points of commonality, but those points are very different from a peach or mango. The nucleus is like the sun at the center. Electrons orbit around the nucleus like planets orbiting the sun. Different energy levels are like different orbital distances of planets. Those are places of good fit. But clearly there are places of poor fit. That is, the fuzzy quantum nature of electrons and the nucleus, for example. So we could instead replace the solar system with swirling clouds. This new metaphor captures part of the underlying concept of an atom in a different way that illustrates the fuzzy quantum nature of the atom. There are other metaphors that could have had even more points of commonality. For example, a city is an interesting metaphor for atoms. Among other things, the city has bridges that are like chemical bonds. So the next time you're struggling to grasp a new concept, try creating a metaphor through generative AI to help your brain form those crucial connections. Prompt it to give you a metaphor for a concept you might be struggling to understand, and don't hesitate to ask for another metaphor if you'd like. It can be surprising what kind of wildly different metaphors it can provide. Perhaps ask it for a metaphor that relates to your favorite hobby. That's all for now. Happy learning!